Romans 8:5-8, for they that are after the flesh do mind the things of the flesh, but they that are after the Spirit, the things of the Spirit. For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace. Because the carnal mind is enmity against God, for it is not subject to the law of God, neither indeed can be. So then they that are in the flesh cannot please God. God tells you and I that as long as we are minding the things of the flesh, we cannot please God. You know, there was a saying that I heard quite often growing up, and there's a saying that I have used in my own parenting, and that phrase is this: have you lost your mind? Have you lost your mind? Here God tells us that if we are after the flesh or pursuing the flesh, that our mind will be centered around the flesh. But if we are after the Spirit or pursuing the Spirit of God in our lives, that our mind will be centered around the Spirit's working. God tells us that as long as we are minding the flesh, we cannot please God. He goes on in Philippians 2 and verse number 4 and says this: look not every man on his own things, but every man also on the things of others. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. So God goes a step further here and again challenges us not to look after our own things, but to look after the things of others and after the things of God. And he refers to that as having the mind of Christ. It's very interesting to me here that God compares minding the flesh and minding the Spirit, and then he commands us to have the mind of Christ. I wonder this morning, have you lost your mind? You see, when we were born with a carnal, fleshly, selfish mind. There was nothing we could do to change it, but since we've been born again, we have a choice. God gives us the opportunity to lose our mind for the things of the flesh and to lose our mind for our own self-will and the things of this world and to gain the mind of Christ. I remember in school, I had a friend that was rebellious, and he was in the Christian school, but really wanted nothing to do with God. One day in Sunday school, he said to our Sunday school teacher, he said, "You are trying to brainwash us." And my Sunday school teacher didn't miss a beat. He looked at him and said, "Boy, your mind needs washed." What was he saying? He was saying, young man, you have a carnal mind, and your mind needs to be washed. It needs to be cleansed. You know, we as Christians need to come to the point that we lose our mind for the flesh and for our own self-will, and we gain this mind of Christ. And by the way, God assures us that there will be no chance of pleasing him until that transformation occurs. I wonder today, Christian, have you lost your mind? I wonder today, how do you look at your decisions? When you have a decision of life, you are in a valley of decision. Do you approach that decision with your own understanding, with your own self-will, with your own self-serving carnal mind? Or do you have the mind of Christ? Do you have a mind that considers how it will affect others and whether or not it will please God? Do you have the mind of Christ in your decisions, or have you not lost your mind yet? Hey, when someone mistreats you, how do you respond to that mistreatment? Do you respond to them considering them? Do you respond to them considering what God would have you to do in that situation? Or have you not lost your mind yet? Hey, Christian, when difficulties come, do you remain faithful to God and trust him through the difficulty? Or do you begin to lean on an arm of flesh? Do you begin to once again go back to the muddy puddle of your own understanding? Have you not yet lost your mind? You know, the average Christian does not have a problem following God until a crossroad comes, a crossroad of decision or a crossroad of difficulty. And then you will find out whose mind you really have. Hey, parents, when we talk about our children, are they an inconvenience for you, or do you look at them as a blessing and a responsibility from God in which you must invest time and effort and prayer to ensure that you raise them to the glory of God? Do you have the mind of Christ in your child rearing, or haven't you lost your mind yet? You know, when something the preacher says doesn't jive with your way of living, but it is from the Bible, do you respond to that truth the way that God would have you to respond to that truth? Or have you not lost your mind yet? You see, until you lose your mind, you cannot please God. God tells us to let this mind be in you, which is also in Christ Jesus. You know, in the last decade of my life, I've made some decisions that made sense to almost no one in my life. When we moved to Delaware to start our church, it made sense to almost nobody. When we moved from Delaware to North Carolina, it made sense to very few people. We even had good Christian people that thought we were outside of God's will and we were moving for the wrong reasons. You say, well, why did you move? Because I knew it was what Christ wanted me to do. Do you know why I have stayed where I've been as long as I've been? Because I knew it was God that had me there. I did what I knew Christ wanted me to do. May I say this morning, you and I ought to constantly be seeking to die to our own will and our own desires and try daily to have the mind of Christ. With your decisions today, have you not lost your mind yet? In your relationships today, how you respond to people, how you treat people, have you not yet lost your mind? With the challenges that you'll face in life today, how will you respond to them? Will you respond in a way that Christ would have you to respond, or have you not yet lost your mind? Might I challenge you, if you are approaching your life, your decisions, your relationships, your difficulties with your own carnal, fleshly understanding, your own carnal, fleshly mindset, you are not handling things the way Christ would want you to. Let me encourage you. Have you lost your mind? If not, let me encourage you to let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. I wonder, have you lost your mind? I pray this has been a help and an encouragement to you. We love you, folks. We'll see you tonight at 7.